Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Dear listener, the show today is about North American Spiritists. And we ask the good spirits who are conducting the work at Kardec Radio to find in us goodwill heart, to share the best in us, and to work in our most efficient manner. Because Allan Kardec was very efficient. He was not only efficient, but he was a great educator. Such educator that in the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, question 798, in the chapter that talks about the law of progress, he talks about Spiritism's influence on progress, and he asked, will Spiritism become a common belief, or will it only be accepted by a few? And the answer of the illuminated minds of the beyond were, it will certainly become a common belief, and will mark a new era in the history of humankind. For it belongs to nature itself. In fact, the time has come in which it must take its place among the other branches of human knowledge. It will nevertheless have to withstand great struggles, more against personal interest than against conviction, because you must not ignore the fact that there are people interested in fighting it, some out of self-centeredness, others from purely material motives. Its opponents, however, will become more and more isolated and will finally be forced to think like the others, lest they make themselves look foolish. Don't we love these wise words of the spirits? Oh, yes, we do, because they give us great hope. Of course, and recently, some people have been asking us whether or not the Spiritist movement in the world has become a Brazilian Spiritist movement, and our answer was, of course not. We shouldn't even dare to think of such a thing. With all the caring feelings that we have for Brazilian people, because we ourselves were born there as well, though we have American citizenship, the pride of nationality has in humankind's history brought great wars and disasters, and we don't want to follow through those footsteps. Like the French, as Allan Kardec, and mainly Allan Kardec, they had their main role in bringing the Spiritist thought to earth in a first pass. We, the Brazilians and many others, we also have our role in the dissemination of Spiritism in the current world. But other nationalities, other peoples also have their contribution. After all, Spiritism is the promised consoler by Jesus, our planetary governor, our model and guide, and he cares in such a way for all the people that he shares the responsibility also of the dissemination of Spiritism to all nationalities and peoples. So Brazilians do not uphold any copyright, let's say this way, on or entitlement. There's no feeling of entitlement that we shall allow in that regard, with all the respect and gratitude we may have. That's why we have this show about North American Spiritists, because they are here. Maybe you haven't noticed, but they are everywhere and elsewhere. And I tell you a cute story about a little girl who is around 8 years of age. She comes to the Spiritist Society of Virginia with her parents. And today I heard from her parents saying, as she has been coming, she loves so much and embraces the teachings, and we can see when she's here among ourselves, that these days she proposed at school that during their lunch break, the children got together to talk about their churches. That was her proposal, because she wanted to talk to them about the Spiritist Center. And she asked each one of them to bring a bottle of water. She thought about the blessing of the water and other things that she learns in the Spiritist Center. Dear listeners, this is also another sign that the new generation of Spiritists is already here in the very soil of North America. And that's why we are honored by the presence of some of them. Of course, maybe you who is listening to us right now wasn't called in, maybe because we don't know you, or if we know you, we have plans to bring you to Kardec Radio in the future. But we are aware there are great North American Spiritists that are here to do this partnership with the Latin American in general, the Latin American spiritists who immigrated to the United States and joined forces. As Kardec said, majority of the struggles will be due to personal motives. Should we outline some of them? I think we should. For example, let's say husbands or wives who do not support spiritists. Let's say children of leaders sometimes of spiritism who create a lot of problem and don't want them to engage because they think they are being too dedicated to spiritism, or as they say, fanatic. Let's say others will put some challenges for us spiritists as they are friends of ours and they come and tease us. They say, oh, you're not a spiritist, so you believe in spirits, etc. So these are the personal motives that will create a lot of struggle. But as Kardec not Kardec himself, but the good spirits through the compilation of Allan Kardec, they said in the question 798 of the Spirit's book, these people will become fewer and fewer, and they will look foolish themselves. We don't want them to look foolish, though. We want them to hear Kardec Radio and be invited voluntarily to come, because we spiritists are not here to proselytize. We don't need millions of people to come and join forces. It's not a mass movement. Spiritism is an inner movement. It's a movement within ourselves. It's a teaching that comes to give us new perspective in life. It goes from inward to the outside of us. It's in to the outer side. It's not from the outer side inside. That's why we may talk to people. They may find it beautiful. They may even see materialized spirits. Nothing's going to change. Well, what do? We keep on going, because Spiritism is here for each one of us. If it's making us feel better, if it's making us transform our lives for the better, then little by little things will be transformed around us. We don't need to worry about other people's options but ourselves. Let us talk to these friends who are here, and we will introduce them to you one by one as we go along this show. Before we get there, we want to share with you that Kardec Radio is in already 46 countries in 3 months. Can you believe it? We have an audience in 46 countries. Plus, we also have our shows available on demand at iTunes. You can download them for free. Can you believe it? For free. What do we find for free nowadays? You know, especially at the quality of the teachings that are being shared by our guests at each and every show. It's been 16 shows, and it's great. It feels great. Many people have been writing, very grateful to God, of course, for the opportunity, because we are simply an instrument. Plus, you can also listen to them on demand on your mobile. Go to our website, www.kardecradio.com, and listen to it. So how about now, as we invite you to join us in this program in a high tone prayer of service, because that's what Spiritists are all about. Service. They are here to serve people in the world, beings in the world, from plant to animals to serving human beings. And this is a prayer put together by the great Emmanuel through the mediumship of Chico Xavier. Let's listen to this and rejoice in these moments of service with the North American Spiritists.
Prayer of Service. Lord, teach us to walk the enlightening path of service. Give us the strength to destroy the heavy fortress of our wrongdoings, the courage to pave the way to freedom from ourselves, and the means to unlock our hearts in favor of our neighbors, surrendering to them at last the treasures of love with which you entrusted us. Wherever we walk, may pain become less hurtful, ignorance less aggressive, hatred less cruel, darkness less dense, lethargy less shadowing, intolerance less destructive. If we do not yet possess the positive qualities to enrich our terrestrial journey, Help us to mitigate
We're
the
sorry,
injustices
your call
that
did not go
surround
through.
us.
Will you please try your call
May
again?
we, in your name, distribute fraternity and renewal, and use with happiness the sublime and invisible gifts of silence, comprehension, and renunciation. Lord, who taught us without words the supreme lessons of simplicity in the cradle and of sacrifice in the cross, leading us toward spiritual development and divine resurrection. Guide our uncertain walk and help our sanctified propositions, so that your will, merciful and just, be unto us, with us, and for us, today and forever, wherever we may be. So be it.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Come to the first Texas Spiritist Symposium. On October 22nd, the Spiritist Movement of Texas organizes the first symposium at the Lone Star State. The symposium begins at 10 a.m. and ends at 5:30 p.m. The invited speakers include Danielle Assis from California, Vanessa Saloni from the Maryland-Virginia area, Julie Carvalho from New Jersey, and Mauricio Cisnero from Florida.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday, live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, North American Spiritists, do you believe Spiritism is in North America? Yes, it is. Not in the mainstream yet, but it's coming. And who is in a rush? We need to get ready, because when people come, our centers need to be ready. But let's talk to some of the people who are making a difference, both in the U.S. and in Canada. And if you're listening to this show, and you ask yourself, or you want to ask us, like, how come I wasn't invited to be a guest there? Don't worry. You will be in the future. There are so many shows ahead of us. It's just the beginning of this discovery. Who are the North American Spiritists? Talking about North American Spiritists, we can't forget to talk about William James. In the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, which is already published by the International Spiritist Council, in Chapter 5, there is a question that was asked to him, 20 questions that were actually asked to William James, the great American researcher, Harvard professor, and major thinker in psychology. He also engaged in the spiritual research of the time. And in one of the questions about how we can disseminate this work, he answered, besides many other things, we should broaden our area of help and elevate the level of understanding toward our responsibilities in the Spiritist work. If we do what we wish we'll only own that which we do. The laws of the universe are fair. I believe we can summarize the main rules of work in the following program. Number 1, we should feel with self-control. Number 2, we should think with elevation. Number 3, we should speak constructively. And number 4, we should study always. And then number 5, we should serve always more. This is the great William James sharing to Spiritists his recipe of a successful work. And talking about it, we have here with us our first guest, Gloria Coelho. Though her last name is Brazilian, she's American. Daughter of Brazilian, but she's American. And she has quite an interesting story on how she got acquainted with Spiritism. And she's doing great work as the director and founder of the Caritas Spiritist Center in Boulder, Colorado. Beautiful city, great people, and great work that they are doing there as well. It's a lot of work, right, Gloria? Welcome to Kardec Radio. Thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, Gloria, can you share with our audience the beautiful story on how you got acquainted with Spiritism? Because as far as we know, you're not raised a Spiritist. Are we right?
Correct. I was not raised Spiritist. My parents were Brazilian and Catholic, but had no understanding or interest in Spiritism. And my introduction really started here because I had a friend who told me about Spiritism a little bit. He didn't know that much, but he had a copy of the Spirits book, and he gave it to me to read, and it resonated very strongly. When I read it, I knew that it was very logical and made a lot of sense, and that I loved it. And he had started a small group of friends who were interested in learning the healing work, energy work, and this was back in the late 70s, and so none of us was familiar with healing work, of an energetic nature, and so and we had nobody to teach us, but he was very interested in it. I was somewhat resistant, but became interested once I had an experience, a very spontaneous healing experience with my daughter, who was still a baby and had gotten sick, and all of a sudden this happened, and then that made me curious about it. So we started this little group, but we had no idea how to go about doing this work. And then my friend, is very clairvoyant, and he told me that I had a guide who was a surgeon and who was beside me at all of the meditations. We always started with a half-hour meditation. And it turned out that this guide was my grandfather, who had died before I was born and who was a surgeon. And he went to quite a lot of trouble to identify himself, showing things to my friend that he had owned during his lifetime, and showing him scenes from my early childhood, and etc. So he identified himself to my friend, who identified him to me. And at that time, I had no understanding of guides, that we all had guides. I really had no knowledge of Spiritism when we first started meeting. It was only about maybe 6 months to a year after we started that I actually, that he loaned me the Spirits book. So anyway, it turned out that I could hear my guide. At first, I didn't think I could, and then I realized that I was hearing him, but I didn't realize that it was, the spirit guide and not my own thoughts. Once we established a connection and a means of communication, he instructed us on the Spiritist healing, which we didn't know was Spiritist healing. We just thought this was his idea of what we should do in order to develop this healing work.
So, Gloria, just interrupt you. When you say the Spiritist healing, it's what we call passes?
Yes.
All right.
You see, we call it Spiritist healing here in Colorado just to differentiate it from things like Reiki and therapeutic touch. But it's because in Brazil it's the healing passes, with channeling the energy to the person. And it has similarities to these other modalities that we have here.
And actually, in England, they actually, even the Spiritist movement there decided to call passes actually the Spiritist healing too. So it's quite interesting. Yes, that's how they treat it too. So it's okay. It's just a reference for our audience. So
yes.
Okay.
Of course. And so, my grandfather, my guide, was telling us, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this, and explaining the healing work and the techniques and, how to bless the water and all of that. And we thought we were unique in the world. We had no idea anyone did this because none of us had ever heard of this. And it wasn't until, so we started working, and it wasn't until about a year or a year and a half later that, and our group was still meeting on a weekly basis, that I went to Brazil to visit relatives. And I asked my cousin's chauffeur if he knew of any Spiritist centers, because by this time I knew there were Spiritist centers. I knew they did healing work, and I wanted to see how they worked. Mm-hmm. And so he took me to a Spiritist center that he frequented, and I spoke with the director there, and it was in Rio. And the director was he was very, very gracious, and I asked him, I said, we have a little healing group in New York, which is where I lived at that time, and I would love to know how you do your healing work, because I'm sure we could learn something. And he started describing it, and it was identical to what my grandfather had taught me. And the interesting thing was that even though my grandfather had taught us the Spiritist healing, the same work that is done in Spiritist centers in Brazil, he himself was not a Spiritist during his lifetime. He was a surgeon, but he was not Spiritist. But I guess, once he was a spirit, maybe he took more of an interest, and that's what he taught us. So it was a wonderful confirmation, and that was how I came to go to my first Spiritist center. And they actually weren't doing the healing work that night. They were doing the disobsession work. So I sat in on that, and that was quite an eye-opener for me. I didn't really know what was going on, but I thought it was very wonderful. And that's how that was my introduction to Spirit.
Wow. And then, of course, going from there, you became acquainted with Altivo Panfiro.
Yes,
and then what a great, let's say, mentor in the material plane. And you even brought him to Colorado. I remember you sharing that with us.
Well,
right?
He's the reason that I opened the Spiritist Center, because by the time I met him, that was about 15 years ago, and by that time I had been to several Spiritist centers and was very inspired by the work that was being done and by the joy that I sensed in the people at the Spiritist centers in Brazil, and particularly in the one that he directed, which is the Centre Spirit de Léon Denis in Rio. And I was so inspired, and each time I would come back, I just felt such a longing to be part of a center like that. I didn't want to start one. I just wanted to have one, to have that community. And there was no Spiritist Center in Colorado. And so I invited him to come because there were a number of friends of mine here in Boulder who wanted to know more about Spiritism. And I thought, who better to teach them if he would come. And so I invited him, and he came, and he ran a week-long healing course and then also a weekend seminar on Spiritism. And about 50 people attended that seminar. And over we kept hearing, well, I always knew this somehow, but I never had anyone to talk with about these things. I always somehow knew that there were spirits and knew that we had guides, but I never had anyone I didn't know anyone else who thought the same way. And so finally, after the fifth or sixth person had said this, he turned to me and he said, Gloria, I insist that you start a Spiritist Center here. These people need community. And so that's how it all came about.
People sometimes don't realize how easy it is when they find a center and it's there already. The SSB these days was turning 13 years, and I was sharing with our community there on Saturday. I said, to tell you the truth, I remember 13 years ago coming here to the dry land of Baltimore in regard to Spiritism, dry in the sense of no Spiritist Center whatsoever. It's hurtful. And then when you guys come here 13 years later and we have a center, all we would recommend everybody to do is be grateful. Don't complain, and just be grateful and help. Please do not complain, because you don't know. It would be worse without it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Gloria.
Yeah, our center will be 8 years.
It's such a joy, though hard work, right?
A lot of hard work, but worth it because it's wonderful work.
No wonder Kardec said for Spiritist centers we need 3 things: work, solidarity, and tolerance. Now we know why he recommended those lines of action, because without work there's no center. Without one another, unity, we don't hold ourselves up. And without tolerance, because none of us are perfect, we can't keep on going together, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, Gloria, as an American Spiritist, what would you say from the bottom of your heart and reasoning, because now we know emotions and reasoning are part of one process, in regard to how do you see Spiritism being of help to people in North America?
Oh, I think that there are a number of niches that Spiritism fills that we need here in North America. One of them is just an understanding of the afterlife and what happens to us when we die. I think that there is a great fear in at least in the United States. I don't know about Canada, but in the United States, and I think in the Western world in general, because the Judeo-Christian tradition doesn't really teach anything specific about the afterlife except, heaven and hell idea, which I think many people reject because it's overly simplistic, but then they don't have anything else to replace it, and so it becomes a tremendous fear of death. And that fear of death makes the idea, the subject of death, very taboo. And the taboo, of course, creates a somewhat of an obsession, so that we can't turn on the news or read the newspaper or see a movie or, read a book without death being a theme, who was killed, who killed them, all that kind of thing. which is natural. When there's a taboo, human nature wants to know more about it, and yet it's still taboo. So it's a conflict, and I think Spiritism teaches us. When we go for a vacation, we look into the place where we're going, and we find out as much as we can, and what sites we want to see, and what do we want to do there, and what there is to do. And we're all heading to the spirit world sooner or later, and yet people are afraid of thinking about it, and I think it's very reassuring when they read, for instance, the Spirits book, and we discuss, the themes, and it's very reassuring to know, and especially, of course, the Andre Luis books, that there is a world and that there is a life after death, and we're not just sitting on a cloud and doing nothing, that there is much activity and much potential for learning and for growing after death as well as before, and that death really isn't any kind of ending except for the body. It's just a transition. So that's one thing that I think is very important, because we don't have a tradition that explains that. And so Spiritism really helps. It helps to accept when someone dies, who we love, and it helps to accept our own mortality.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
It's very consoling. So, Gloria, this program is mostly the beginning of a series in which we want to promote reflections. Also, we want to give hope to people with this program about North American Spiritists, so they know Spiritism is here. But we are aware, despite the success stories of all of us here and there, with a lot of work from both sides of life, but there is a lot that we still need to work. If we could ask you on what, of course, it could be a list, but what if you could choose like one main thing that you think we could do to help spread Spiritism in a more, let's say this way, culturally competent and culturally sensitive, efficient manner in North America, what would you say we all need to do in order to make that happen?
What we all need to do, because I was going to say the translation of, more of the books, and that is happening. That's a very important part of it. Also, these wonderful films that are coming now from Brazil, the Chico Xavier and Nosso Lar, the Spiritist centers can show those films, and they inspire people, and then they want to know more about Spiritism, because there's such inspiring stories, and they're so well made. So that's another thing. And I think we need more Spiritist centers, because even people who don't know much about Spiritism, they have needs that only Spiritist centers really can provide, such as, if they're having, either they are mediums and they're having random experiences that sometimes can even be frightening, and they don't understand, what's going on. There aren't very many resources for that. And so a Spiritist center can explain to them and train them and reassure them and help them to use their gift instead of being used by it, So I think those are the things that come to my mind instantly. And, communication. I mean, today we have such instant communication on so many, the technology is just phenomenal, so that the word can get around pretty quickly. Using those means of communication to explain things, to teach, not to recruit, but to teach and educate. I think those are important avenues.
Gloria, we're so thankful for your presence at Kardec Radio today. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being here with us.
And thank you for having this wonderful program. I hope it reaches many, many people.
Thank you. May God bless.
You too.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book And Life Goes On by the Spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The Spiritist magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join the Third British Congress on Medicine and Spirituality. The British Union of Spiritist Societies and the International Medical Spiritist Association organize a 2-day Medical Spiritist Conference to happen on November 5th and 6th at the Rich Miggs Cultural Foundation in London, UK. Several doctors, Spiritist physicians will speak at the conference. For more information, please go to www.medspiritcongress.org.
And now we return to our program.
Talking about Spiritism in North America. We have special guests, people who have been working on Spiritism in the U.S. and also in Canada. And when we talk about Spiritism, it reminds us also of a passage from the book Heaven and Hell, in which a spirit named Jean Renaud, he actually came spontaneously to the Parisian Spiritist Society and talked to his friends. He was actually a French philosopher at the time, and one of the things he said is so interesting because he died quite young, and he was acquainted with Spiritism in the spirit realm, and he said, "Who told you that my death would be of no benefit to Spiritism, its future and development? My friend, have you noticed the line of progress the Spiritist faith has taken? First, God granted the physical proofs, the dance of the tables, the raps, and all that sort of phenomena. These were meant to call attention to the matter and were an entertaining preface to it. People needed tangible evidence in order to believe. Now, however, it is quite different. After the physical evidence, God began to speak to the mind, to common sense, and to cool reason, no longer through amazing phenomena, but through rational things that ought to convince and attract even the most obstinate disbeliever. And still, that was only just the beginning. Pay close attention to what I am saying. A whole series of intelligent and irrefutable phenomena are about to occur, and the already great number of followers of the Spiritist faith will increase further. God is going to take over the minds of the elite, the highest of intellect, talent, and knowledge. It will be a shining radiance that will expand over the whole earth like an irresistible fluid, and it will push the most obdurant to research to the infinite, to the study of this wonderful science that teaches us such sublime maxims. all will gather around you, and regardless of any learned title they may have been conferred with, they will become humble and small in order to learn and be convinced. Later on, when they have been sufficiently taught and convinced, they will use their authority and their famous names to advance the cause even further, to reach the final limits of the goal that have been proposed to you, which is the regeneration of humankind through a rational and profound understanding of past and future existences. This is my sincere opinion about the current state of Spiritism. And this was actually brought in the 1860s at Allan Kardec time. So we see that, as said, Spiritism is for everyone. It's not only for those who are in Brazil or in Latin America. It's for everyone. And Spiritism is already in North America, in Canada. And that's why we have here with us Paul Keegan. Paul Keegan from the Joana de Angelis Spiritist Studies Center in Toronto, Canada. Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us at Kardec Radio.
Hi, Vanessa. I'm happy to be on Kardec Radio with you. We listen to it every week, and I'm excited to be part of it now.
I understand you're so committed to the Joana de Angelis Spiritist Study Group that you have a specific role there now. Am I right?
Yes, we are definitely committed. I don't think I could be committed more than I am to living and promoting Spiritism in the way that I can, and we do that through teaching every Sunday the Spiritist doctrine in English.
So Can you share briefly with our listeners how you got acquainted with Spiritism?
All right. Well, briefly, my partner, Maria Lucia, is from Brazil, and we met over the Internet. And long story short, she came to Toronto to live with me. And she has been a Spiritist before meeting maybe 15 years. Every Sunday night I drove her to her meeting, and I sat in the little coin laundry next door and came in at the end. And but after about 3 years, she said to me one day, "Why don't you read this book?" And she gave me the book, Life Goes On. And I read it, but it was too much. It was over my head. And I didn't say anything because I wanted to be polite, but I couldn't believe that, here she is, a professional person, and it was really a little bit high, I thought. And maybe a year later, she was very discreet. She said, "Why don't you read Kardec's The Spirits book?" And I'm a reader. And I read that, and I wasn't into it a night or two, and I said to her, "I have never read anything that is so clear." And all the books I read before, they try to win you over, with mystification and big words. They weren't doing that at all. These were just questions and answers. I was so excited, and I still am, but everything I read, starting with Kardec, but it was reading the Spirits book that convinced me. I didn't need to hear anymore. I was in then.
Yes, quite inspirational, we would say that way. And who doesn't like to be inspired, right?
Yeah, so from there I just read everything. Obviously we don't have as much in English as there is in Portuguese, but I read everything I could possibly get my hands on, and all the 5 books by Kardec I must have read, maybe 4 or 5 times each. And but I came into it with extensive studies in philosophy, metaphysics, and theology, and I wasn't looking for any more. I had got a stage in my life where there's no more answers and you forget. But I think now what it's done is made me feel young again. There's a lot of answers there, and life is all of a sudden. I'm retired, but man, I feel like a youngster now. I got a lot of living to do yet. So that's just some of the feelings I've had since I've been now living and reading and helping to promote Spiritism with Maria Lucia. Together we do it each Sunday, and we're looking now to reach further and maybe have more active feel in the community, just activities. we're looking. We had, for example, about a month ago here, what Toronto has is called a book fair, word on the street, where the publishers and authors will meet out usually on the street, but this time it was a big park and a beautiful day. And we had a booth there. We had a lot of people come by, and everybody was respectful. Some bought books, and some asked questions and took pamphlets, and it sort of opened our appetite to. I remember what I think Kardec was told when he was writing, that he was told by, I guess, his mentor spirit, that he's got to show himself. It wasn't good enough just to write. And I realized after that day that, here in Toronto, we've got to show ourselves. We get excited, but we can't stay in the closet. And so we're looking for more ways. And, I'm thinking maybe I'd write an article the odd time to the Sunday paper that deals with religion. You could even write on the wondrous findings of the Hubble telescope. And I remember reading and looking on YouTube, the staring that it did for 15 days at nothing, and what they found, was just galaxies upon galaxies staring into nothing, and what that means. And even NASA now says they don't say there's not life on other planets. They say there's not life as we know it. And so these are issues I think that North America would be open to hear talk about. And I hear of other friends who have done regression therapy, a dear friend and neighbor of mine, and that's reincarnation. So I think we're noticing that as we reach out that it's maybe you can't push Spiritism, and you don't have to. But if people are interested in regression therapy, okay, we have a common ground. And other times, everybody have friends who are very knowledgeable of the Bible, and they believe in the messages that the Virgin Mary got, and the communication, and Christ driving out the evil spirits and so forth. Well, those spirits then were active back in Galilee, and so they do have communication with the world, and good and bad. But that's been around for a long time. That's only in the last 1,500 years we've kind of said that doesn't apply anymore. But so we, I think to engage the North American audience, there are many valid issues that. We have the famous Canadian I know, Ian Stevenson, and his lifetime work on interviewing and studying the children's memories of past lives. And I find that when I talk about issues like that. I don't talk about Spiritism as such unless they want to, but there's certainly a lot of opening. And when I look at the creative energies of North America, especially in the United States, I think we're close to. I was thinking today, what we need to, with Spiritism, we can start to believe the songs we sing. We sing the song, and I'm sure we all choke up when we hear it, Imagine. But it doesn't just have to be. I was looking at Leonardo da Vinci's sketching of an airplane, which he did a few hundred years ago. Well, somebody believed, and now it's not a fantasy anymore. And and I was thinking of Martin Luther King, that I have a dream. Well, it doesn't have to be just a dream. But I know that I had quit dreaming because it wasn't worth it. And I would look at the Hubble telescope, and I'd go away frustrated because it didn't leave me. I wanted answers, and I wanted more than I knew. But then when I started reading the books and the teachings of Spiritism, oh man, you can tell.
Yeah. So as you're talking, we were asking ourselves, we can recognize the universality, as you're saying, of the Spiritist ideas, as Kardec said in the Spiritist books. We don't hold the truth, to ourselves alone. It's spread out to, as they say, to the poles of the earth in the Gospel according to Spiritism. But at the same time, what do you think? Spiritism in itself, let's say there is the teaching and there is the movement. It can be either or. But what do you think? How can Spiritism help North America? Because we know we need help, socially speaking, individually speaking, even politically speaking. Although we don't want to go there, but we know we need help at all different dimensions.
I'll tell you my
right?
own experience. In 1975, I was fully trained in transcendental meditation, and I've done it twice a day since. And in that year, 75, there was a belief under the Maharishi Mars Yoga, and we did organize. I was a little bit careless. I was at work that day, and I didn't concentrate. But there was a belief that if 1% of the population can think positive thoughts for any period of time, it can influence the rest of North America. And now I didn't see the official results of this thing because I was busy at my job, and I kind of didn't quite believe it myself, I guess. But that there was some preliminary reports that during that period of time, there was less aggression, whether it was robberies or unnecessary car accidents or whatever. So how can Spiritism help North America? Because in Spiritism we learn the value, how important our thoughts are, how the right thoughts will go out and influence the other person, will come back to us. That's how it'll influence North America. We don't have to, I don't think, convert 100% if we have 1%.
Yeah.
The influence is so powerful. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've been aware of that for many years. And then I read it now, and I listen to SS Baltimore and your talks as well. Mm-hmm. And go on to YouTube and get a lot of neuropsychology on the power of thoughts. Well, this is certainly so believed and taught in Spiritism that our thoughts and the inspirations of our good spirits and the inspirations of Christ, it's up to us to send them on. And we don't have to sometimes leave our living room. We can. And it kind of saddens me when I see, because our political party doesn't win, we wish them evil.
Yeah. And
we're wishing evil on ourselves. And it's the same thing as you wish evil on another person. Those evil thoughts come back to you. Mm-hmm. And so I feel sad when I see people criticizing the opposition party or whatever it is that they're not supporting, and they're harming themselves and they're harming our nation. But I think there's so much creative energy in the United States and hopefully in Canada that I think everybody I have several the Spirits books copies, and I give them this book, and I don't try to convert them. I say this book will convince you through reason. You don't need to listen. So I spread them around. I got one out in British Columbia now, another one here in Toronto. I gave it to my two sisters, and they're quite committed to it and convinced. And they live in towns where there isn't groups, but they read everything that I can, and they listen to Baltimore on the internet all the time. And hopefully they'll listen to this interview too.
That's great.
So I think individually we should have a few copies of the Spirits book. And because that book doesn't try to sugarcoat it, doesn't try to please you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't try to win converts. It's a power of reason, and that's why it overwhelmed me. Because before, the other writers, they try to impress you, but no, Kardec doesn't. He just tells it as it was revealed to him. So I think that would be a big way. And also is get out. I'm looking to maybe, if I could wander by some of the university sometime and maybe get a chance to give a guest lecture, or talk, whatever. Same thing we do on Sunday, but just tailored up a bit. Mm-hmm. I think the 1% will make the difference.
Yes, you're right. The power of thought. So on the other hand, what would you say in regard to if you could choose one main issue that is or represent some form of obstacle in regard to how can we become more efficient in regard to spreading this message without the willingness to proselytize? It's more like, how can we become more available or make this more available. I'll give an explanation on, like yesterday, we were at the Spiritists out of Virginia. We had a meeting, and we had a special 30-minute talk for newcomers about what Spirit is all about. And we use a clip that we put together. This is Baltimore. And then later, we had a few, extra points to add about Kardec and the upcoming of Spiritism and the purpose. And then we had questions. And one of the people were like, they loved the bridge of science and religion, though they still needed extra elements to understand, for example, some of the words we use, like spirit guides that we're mentioning when we're doing our prayer, and people who are not very familiar because they don't come from religious backgrounds, and they were asking us about it. So then we realized, can we tailor it ever more efficiently to make it clear, more accessible, or let's say culturally sensitive in North America to make Spiritism more mainstream? What do you think is the main thing that we need to pay attention to?
Well, I guess that, if you look at it, say, continent-wise, that would be one level. If I were to look at it from the bird's eye view, say, of the city of Toronto, we're very multicultural here, and we think in North America, even maybe Spiritists might fall into this, that we have discovered, the idea of reincarnation. Well, half the world has believed that without us. And half the people here in Toronto believe in reincarnation because they come from the Far East. And so what I'm saying is that I think part of it is to reach out where we have a common thing with the other faiths. And I know here that I would be welcome to sit in any prayer group that they have, just because of the commonality that we both believe in reincarnation. And then instead of seeing the negative things that we hear about each other, we find out that we are the majority on some issues, and so that would be one of the things. Would be in areas where you do have a multicultural society, a lot, then it's very easy to build bridges there, because then they'll have influence in the university, and they'll have influence to get funding for this and that, because they're in different areas of business too. So you get support rather than feel as though you're pushing the stone up the hill, by yourself. So certainly here, from my point of view, that would be, that would be one area. Another area I know in say St. Michael's College here at the University of Toronto, where I went, they had for many years study of comparative religion. Mm-hmm. But I would like to check, and I hope I do, that do they have Spiritism a little time for that also? So I think that would be, I'm looking at it from my own retiree's point of view, and so what I know, But the other things I see, which is good, is people are posting on Facebook all the time. This is happening in here, and this is happening there, and what would seem strange 5 years ago becomes sort of like commonplace, and the resistance is I think is coming down through using the different media, as I see our group here, certainly in Toronto, is using all the time, and I think wonderfully. I wish I had, otherwise they call that a silver bullet. I don't, I wish
We're trying to find the silver bullet also in the Neuroscience of Pain. It's everywhere, the search for the silver bullet to solve the problems of the human soul. But, Paul, we feel so inspired listening to you, and also it's very calming. So I know in 2 weeks we'll be there with you guys in Toronto, because there is an event.
Having you again, Vanessa. I'm telling you, we listen to SSB every Saturday, whether it's Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, on Thursday night, and Kardec on Saturday at 11, and we get nourished every day by your emissions.
Oh, we are very grateful for your support and encouragement. We need one another for sure to keep on this march. And thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much with us.
Thank you, and God bless, Vanessa.
Thank you. You too. So, dear listener, isn't that amazing? We feel so inspired. And this is to show to all of us that it's coming. Why do people keep resisting the thought that Jesus knows and has a plan? He's the captain of the ship. He knows. He knows what needs to happen. And do you think Spiritism would only come for the French and for the Latin American people? No, it's for everyone. As it's said in the Spirits book, Question and Answer 798, it's clear cut that when Kardec asked about it, the answer is it going to become a common belief? It will certainly become a common belief and will mark a new era in the history of humankind. But of course, the spirits say a lot of struggles will happen along the way that will be fed mostly by personal interests. Many people skip it because they're afraid, or because, I share this with you. I remember years ago at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, as outrageous as it may sound, people coming from other energy medicine approaches, they would come to the Spirit Society of Baltimore and say, you guys, because you don't charge anything for your services, you are creating debt to the people you're serving because they need to pay you so they don't feel indebted with you. And then we smiled and said, really? Because what we give is not ours. It's God's. So even if they pay, they are not paying God because God does not need the money. Whether it's the great dollar or whatever money, God doesn't need it. So, sorry, no excuse for personal interest here. And many people say, but we need to charge so people, see how much it's worth. Great excuses as well. Some people say, Vanessa, I need to charge because I have no other skill. So I have to charge for my mediumship because I don't like computers. I don't like working in offices. I don't like working on this. No, these excuses are of personal interest. And in the practice of Spiritism, there's one main rule, says Allan Kardec, in the Medium's book that is celebrating 150 years this year. It says quite precisely that there are conditions for good exchange with the spirits. And one of them is absence of self-interest. If I am in the center, not saying that we're not there to help ourselves, nourish ourselves, but we cannot be in centers networking for our businesses. Sorry, but that's not a place for this. We cannot be in spiritist centers to actually bargain with God, saying, you see, God, I'm here sitting down, listening to this talk, receiving past, I'm behaving. So go to my business, bring me a promotion, bring me the baby that I've been looking for, bring me the love of my life, blah, blah, blah. No, Spiritist Center is not for that either. As Paul was saying, Kardec does not sugarcoat and is not here to keep us sleeping. We need to be fully aware that we're alive, and as he said, he is happier than ever and enjoying his retirement in a very uplifting manner. What a recipe for rejuvenation. What is the secret recipe? That Spiritism boasts the best in us. That's what it is about. What can we do? Can't help it. So let us go to our next break and come back for more.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Participate on the first Spiritist Seminar of Chicago. On November 19th and 20th, the Spiritist Society of Chicago will be organizing and hosting the first Spiritist Seminar of Chicago. The theme is Spiritual Awareness for a Better Life, with speakers from Brazil, Raul Teixeira and Alírio Cerqueira.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit Andrea Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, as we move forward into this program today, we feel more energized because as North American Spiritists are sharing with us, they are great stories on how they got acquainted with Spiritism, how they committed to the dissemination of it by putting together centers or by joining Spiritist centers and then committing to greater things. Then in that regard, we feel that there's so much hope. As the Spirit said to Allan Kardec, Spiritism will become a common belief. It's also natural. Jesus, the governor, knows. He would bring it to everyone. It's not encapsulated in one nationality. As we said before, let us remember, though in the current world, Brazilians and Hispanic countries have absorbed Spiritism with much ease, but it's not restricted to it because it was actually founded in France, and now it's everywhere and elsewhere. Like Kardec Radio has listeners in more than 46 countries, and based on our emails, mostly in North America, and talking about North America, you know, there is a history. For every movement, there is a history. In 1865, Chico Xavier was, for the first time, landing on the American soil. And the experiences of that visit are published in the book, Among Brothers of Other Lands, a book that was recently published by the International Spiritist Council. Just go to ediceiofamerica.com and you have access to the book. You can buy the ebook form, you can buy the hard copy of it and enjoy, because there are beautiful messages from spirits that are actually North Americans. Quite interesting. A phenomenon in itself. And talking about the first waves of Spiritists in the United States, we have invited the daughter of one of the great waves of pioneers in Spiritism, Yvonne Limoges. She is the director of the Spiritist Society of Florida, and we are honored to have her here with us. She is here to enlighten our minds with her experiences. Thank you, Yvonne, for joining Kardec Radio.
I'm very pleased to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me, Vanessa.
Yvonne, as we were just saying about the successive waves of immigrants who were responsible for the bringing of Spiritism to the United States, though we are aware that at Kardec's time, there were many Americans who were embracing Spiritism because they were mailing Kardec, and he reports it in the Spiritist magazine of his time. But in the 20th century, we had a major wave of immigrants who were responsible for bringing Spiritism to the United States, and we are aware that your father, people in your family in general, were responsible for it. Would you mind sharing this with our audience, please?
Yes, I will even go a little bit further back. When Kardec mailed the books to Spain, okay, my relatives originally from Spain, and I'm of Spanish, Italian, and French heritage. And Amalia Domingo Soler, who I think you're familiar with, and I believe that many Spiritists are familiar with, one of the great Spanish Spiritist writers, corresponded with many people in throughout the world, and many in Puerto Rico and in Latin American countries. Well, my great-great-grandfather founded a center, a Spiritist center in Puerto Rico that is still in existence today, was established in 1903. Also, when my relatives came to New York City, my father attended a Spiritist center that was established in 1933 by a group of Hispanic from Puerto Rico, Hispanics from Puerto Rico, and he attended there. My grandfather and my grandmother attended. My grandmother was a medium there. My dad attended the so-called Sunday school of the church there, the center. And then when my dad was an adult, he attended the mediums class there. And then when he moved due to getting married and having a job in Florida, in St. Petersburg, Florida, he worked for the federal government, and we didn't have a center around here. So I told him, I said, well, then we have to start one because, and he says, well, okay. And we just started inviting close family, and then it was friends, and then friends of friends, and then we've been now meeting for 33 years. We started in our home. My dad's home was in 1978. His name is Edgar Crespo.
For those who don't know.
Right, who don't know him, Edgar Crespo. He did translate Amalia Domingo Solar's book, Memoirs of Father Germain, Memorias de Father Germain.
Beautiful book, and I tell you, beautiful translation as well.
Right.
And I know it's available at Amazon.com, right?
Exactly. And he also translated an also famous medium and healer and orator, Miguel Vives, out of Barcelona, who was very good friends with Amalia. Guía Práctica was called in Spanish. Practical Guide for the Spiritists, basically, is what we put as the title. And it's a very small book, only 100-something pages, very moral. How should Spiritists be with before the Creator? How should Spiritists be with Jesus? How should Spiritists be with fellow Spiritists? I mean, very short, basic chapters, but purest morality, clearly in accordance with the Kardec doctrine.
Exactly.
Just very wonderful, very wonderful.
Yeah, we have that book, and I have to say this. It's a blessing that we have that translation, because often we need very solid guidelines.
You have to put the principles into practice, and that is where I think we, as all Spiritists, we are only really at a level of awareness, because putting it into practice, that involves the different scales of the different incarnations that we're going to have to go through as we evolve further and further and further. And so, there are days that we're going to do well, and there are days that we're not going to do well, but then we have to, do our best that we can.
You are so right. So how would you say, living in America throughout your whole life, how would you say, like in a few points, of course we could discuss, create even a PhD thesis here, how could Spiritists help people who are living in America specifically?
Well, this is the biggest thing, I think. Okay, first off, I think that what the United States Spiritist Council is doing and the federations are doing as Spiritists doing, working collectively, is doing an excellent job, because they're doing the outreach to the Kardec radio, their outreach to the professionals, Dr. Moody, Dr. Schwartz, Dr. Bowman, reaching out to those different organizations, the medical Spiritist conferences. You've got the magazine, you've got Kardec Radio, you've definitely got the translations, all that kind of thing, the symposiums all around the United States. That's an excellent way of spreading Spiritism collectively, okay? But what has to be done now, and Gloria, I think, touched on that a little bit, is that we need more Spiritist centers. And the only way that you can have Spiritist centers if more and more people talk about it. And I think that Spiritists on an individual basis have to get over the fact of their belief and being afraid to discuss it. Some people do not even want to talk about it with their own immediate family. Okay? First off, you have to start with your own immediate family, and let's say you get married, they haven't even had a conversation like with their spouse about what they really believe. And then immediate family, then and then extended family and friends. I mean, that's how our center just grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, because it was my co-workers. I mean, I worked for the federal government, and I said, all my friends showed up. Everyone at my job knew what I did, what I believed. Okay? Then after that, the friends of the families. And then, but you have to be able to be diplomatic. You have to approach people that you feel that would be amenable to the belief. And you have to talk to people that know you well and respect you. And that's when you have to take a good look at yourself and say, am I following the principles of the Spiritist doctrine? If I'm going to tell someone about my beliefs, are they going to say, well, is this person actually even following them? Because we're talking about the morality, because to me there's the two aspects. The whys and wherefores of life. To me, Spiritism explains that, the whys and wherefores of life, because even when I grew up, my parents were Spiritists. I studied other beliefs and religions. I always came back to Spiritism as the only thing that answered my questions about life and the purpose of material life. But we also have to know, it's the morality. Are we living it each day, being as moral person as we can be, being a good person to ourselves, to others, helping others as much as we can, because as it says in throughout the books of Kardec, we are responsible for all the good that we do and all the good that we could have done but did not do, besides whatever wrong we would commit. So it's very strict type of morality, and this can turn a lot of people off. So they will be looking at you and saying, well, is this person even following the doctrine themselves in their behavior? You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think that that's very important, that we have to analyze. We do have to do the self-evaluation on a consistent basis, before we can, go out there and start talking about it. But I think that we need to get over not talking about it. And I think we have to start with what the person believes first. Do you believe in a creator? I do too. Do you believe that we have a soul? Yes. Do you believe that that there is an afterlife? Yes. Well, in my belief, we call it the spirit world. What we are in now is the spirit, the material world, or the material plane. We also believe that there is a spiritual plane or spiritual world. And I said, and you go from there. You build it up slowly. And usually the last thing is reincarnation. And you will not believe how many people will say, I believe in past lives. But the big thing there is how they believe in it. That's where it gets a little tricky. And then, that's where you get into, the laws of reincarnation and the attraction and reaction, the cause and effect and that type of thing. And then that is when you can have more serious conversations. But I think that if you start with what they believe, then they see that what you believe is not so strange or so different.
It's so interesting you're saying this, because the recipe you're giving us is quite fascinating. It's very clear, very practical, and, gives a lot of hope, because you're right. How many people come to us, Yvonne, and they say, I'm going to get married, and we have never talked about it. Uh-oh.
That's right.
And then I say, you're looking for trouble, because now you may be enchanted and not see it, but when trouble comes and when you have your children, maybe your spouse is not going to be approving of it. It's quite unique, the tip you're sharing with us in regard to the
now, one
need
thing
of
I will say
self-effort.
this, not to interrupt, I'm sorry if I interrupted,
Sure.
but there's one thing I want to say that goes along with this. Americans believe a lot of what Spiritists believe, but they just don't realize that it's contained basically within the Spiritist doctrine. And that blows their mind when you tell them that. When they say, well, I believe this, that. Well, that's what we believe. But it's called, we call it Spiritism. Well, I get that a lot. And you know what has helped that is the media tremendously.
Yes, you're right. Yvonne, we also feel very energized by and encouraged by your insights. Thank you so much, Yvonne, for being with us at Kardec Radio in the show and for inspiring us.
Thank you so much, and much peace and love and many blessings to all who are listening, and to you, Vanessa, and congratulations for all the tremendous work that you have been spearheading in this getting Spiritism across in the United States and everywhere else that you've been.
Thank you so much. God bless you too. Thank you. So, dear listener, isn't that fascinating? I'm learning a lot here too about these many insights and tips. You see how together we're better. And it's about the law of society. It's one of the spiritual laws of life, as Kardec said, one of the divine laws. Together, we're better. It even rhymes. So talking about together and better, let us invite our next guest, Debbie Caron from Connecticut. Yes, the Spiritist movement in Connecticut is very good, has lots of Brazilians, but also Americans like Debbie. And she has come very recently and has been shaking up the grounds of the Spiritist movement in Connecticut. Right, Debbie? Welcome to Kardec Radio, Debbie.
Thank you, Vanessa. I don't know how much I'm shaking it, but I try.
Sometimes we need it. Like Jesus, he came and said, guys, wake up from this deep sleep. And people are like, what? We don't like you. Crucified him. Well, even if we get crucified, it's okay. Jesus was there once, and he said we would go there as well. So, Debbie, how did you get acquainted with Spiritism?
Well, a few years ago, on a friend recommendation, I decided to take a vacation trip to Brazil, specifically the coastline between Rio and São Paulo. Mm-hmm. And I was at the airport, and I don't know if it was the good luck or the bad luck, but somehow I tripped over my suitcase after leaving customs, and I bumped into the man who is now my husband, who is spent all his life a native of Rio, a police officer who happened to be at the airport that day. And he had been studying Spiritism for about 11 years, and it was from him that I was introduced to the doctrine. And at first it was quite difficult because we had this language barrier, with me not speaking English and him speaking very, very minimum English. Me not speaking Portuguese. I definitely speak English. And I remember we spent a few days together at that first meeting, and he wanted to introduce me to his Spiritist Center, and it was quite unique. I had never heard of the doctrine, and I didn't know anything about Spiritism, and I went to his center. It was a Friday evening, and there was a lot of people, and I didn't have any idea what was going on, of course, with the language barrier, but the energy I felt in the room was incredible. And, of course, over time, asking more and more questions to my husband, I was able to get information in English. And thanks to you, Miss Vanessa, upon our acquaintance a few years ago, I was able to find some books in English. And the first book I found was the Spirit's book. And I can say the first day I received the book, I stayed up all night trying to read the whole book, and I was just in awe. It answered every question I had about life. And for me, there was no turning back. I had to read as much as I could about this doctrine and learn as much as I could. And I am fascinated every day how much this doctrine has helped me to grow as a person and to help those around me. And it's been an amazing journey to date.
Wow, it's good because as you're saying, Spiritism comes first for us. So from us living better and feeling more fulfilled everything else unfolds. And talking about unfoldment, you've been collaborating mainly with the Spiritist movement in Connecticut, right?
That's correct. You know, Connecticut has the third largest Brazilian population in the United States, which has been an advantage because we have a very large Spiritist center. It's been a bit of a struggle for me not knowing Portuguese because, unfortunately, 98% of the meetings, lectures, and activities are in Portuguese. But I have been very fortunate to meet some wonderful people from the center who have encouraged me, who have been there to answer any questions I have had. So I have been able to continue my studies and hopefully influence other people. I have also come to meet the acquaintance of some Spiritists in the New York area who do conduct lectures in English, and that has been quite encouraging me for as well. So we continue.
We feel empathetic and, forgive,
yeah.
right?
I'm sorry. Yes, but, there's also, it's wonderful also knowing that presence is here, and it will come about with time. And, I have to say, for me, there's really no regrets because I have learned so much from this doctrine. And even when there's the language barrier, the highlight for me last year was meeting personally Divaldo Franco, and he tried so hard to speak to me in English. It was so overwhelming. I caught him one day in the elevator. We were sharing in the same hotel, and he's just, to feel his energy, he's just such a wonderful, wonderful man. And I didn't even need for him to speak words in English, or nothing needed to be said. I felt like we understood each other perfectly, and that's fine. And this doctrine is amazing, though, because what I have done is I'm an avid reader, and I study a lot of different religions and philosophical thoughts, and I've been able to spread the doctrine in a way that I take the concepts from what I have acquired, from what I have learned, and I try to pass that to other people, other American people who aren't familiar with the doctrine, who maybe feel uncomfortable to go to a Spiritist center because the people are not really speaking in English, or they didn't understand the flyer, what the lecture was about. And when they have a hardship, they're going through a bad time, to fraternally console them with the words from the doctrine, from the words of the books, from Emmanuel, Andre Louise, or even from American doctors and mediums that I have read their book that also are based around the same Spiritist concepts. And by spreading these words, these ideas, these thoughts, helping them to keep their thoughts elevated, you're sharing with them, and hopefully they'll share with others. You feel good, they feel good, and hopefully they'll pass it on. And to me, that's the most important part of Spiritism. It's the humanist idea that surrounds it. It's reaching out to others, and it's really a beautiful thing.
That's so interesting. But as we were saying with our previous guests, there's always room for improvement in regard to how we can be more efficient in making it available to North Americans. What would you say is an American Spiritist that we all could do together or individually to make it more culturally sensitive, more efficient in the dissemination of these teachings or the sharing of them?
Well, I would say there's really two things that would be a big help. The first one would be where the Spiritist Center is located is get involved in your local community. Get involved in fundraising and charitable events. Let the community know what you're about and what you're doing. you're a good thing to the community. Reach out to your local community. Don't stay isolated. And that helps a lot. And it spreads the word about your center. And the second thing would be to offer more Spiritist-educated meetings. People who are maybe they come and they're more interested. Maybe they're the speakers, the lecturers of tomorrow. Offer more of these type of courses or classes, if you want to call them that, to help feel comfortable with the doctrine, presenting it to the American community, the American public. Bring into your groups other readings. Bring in readings from Andrew Cohen, from Deepak Chopra, from Raymond Moody, Dr. Siegel. Bring these in and show how common literature that's popular here, how it relates to what we know in the doctrine, where it crosses over, where our commonality is, where our differences are. Let people who are familiar with something feel that common ground and then work with that. They may not understand, as you were saying earlier, some of the terminology in some of the books, so work with what they do know and build on that. And then they'll come to understand and develop and get a broader sense of what Spiritism is really all about.
These are very insightful comments that we appreciate very much you sharing, and it comes very appropriate to the times. There is this big discussion. The Spirit Society of Baltimore was one of the pioneers in opening the doors for, we don't like to say non-spiritists because it's labeling, but just, quote unquote, people who are not familiar with the teachings as labeled spiritists, but it's universal. And some of them were like, no, we shouldn't even talk about these things. And then it reminds us of the closed-mindedness of the Pharisees at Jesus' time that thought they were the sole holders of the truth. And they were not open. They want people to be open to their teachings, but they don't want to be open. So your last comment and also being locally engaged in our communities are very deeply grounded in Kardec's footsteps, because he was like that. He was engaged in the community, and he was so open-minded. Just to give an example to our audience, to go to the Spiritist magazine at his time when he was the editor-in-chief, he used to bring news from newspapers, magazines, and then talk about not only the fact, but the authors and what they were bringing, the books, including, for example, a book that people would like, really? They have Spiritist ideas, like The Count of Monte Cristo. He talks about that book by Alexander Dumas, and he outlines the Spiritist ideas that are in the book. He wouldn't be afraid of bridging it up. It's on us, as Debbie is saying. It is on us to bridge it up, right?
Yes, I think it's very important. I engage sometimes at a local Unitarian center in my community. It's a wonderful group of people, and the minister is very open-minded. And I like what they are preaching there is humanism and unity as one. We are all here to help each other. And they have me participating once a week in a small study group. And it's wonderful to go there because the people there label themselves as Unitarian Universalists. When I speak, when they present a subject matter, of course, many times my thoughts always go back to what I have read from the Spiritist concepts, the Spiritist doctrine, but I present it to them in a language they understand. And every Tuesday when I walk away from this group, I feel so happy because I have spread part of this doctrine to this Unitarian group, but in a way that they understand. We are all looking for humanism. And I think it's wonderful when you work across the divide to work with other people. There's no labels, there's no boundaries. We are all looking for solace and that's what it's really all about.
You're so right. Thank you so much for joining Kardec Radio today and sharing your experience and your insights. We feel very inspired. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you so much for all your hard work. I know I myself, I deeply appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. So, dear listener, you see, Spiritism is here, everywhere. And you're welcome to join because right now there's so many people working more than ever and willing to spread the good news. So right now, as we deepen our reflection into the movement in North America, you're welcome as well to email us at kardecradio@gmail.com or kardec@kardecradio.com, or go to our website, kardecradio.com, and there is a contact form. You fill it out, send us your feedback or comments or requests, because we are here for you to nourish your soul, to share these teachings that made such a difference in our lives. That's why we share. And this feeling of sharing is about the feeling that we are all together. Of course, we need more centers, but we need responsible people, committed people, such as the ones that were invited in our show. And if you are thinking of going to another level of commitment and opening a nucleus, a group, or a center, talk to the Spiritist Council in your country, the United States Spiritist Council at www.spiritist.us, and they can guide you through the steps very safely and with less headaches. And in Canada, we also have the Canadian Spiritist Council, and you spell it out as is CanadianSpiritistCouncil.org, and you can talk to them, and they will guide you through. But remember, don't be too anxious about it. Because I remember talking to Dr. Melvin Morse, who will be with us January 2012 to talk about his amazing research. Dr. Melvin Morse once was in Baltimore, and he was so excited about Spiritism that he said, "Oh, we need to share these teachings. I don't know what to do, but we need to do something to spread it out." And we said, "Yeah, Dr. Morse, you were so right. We love his enthusiasm." And we said, but we need to be careful, because if we spread it out without order and discipline and centeredness, we can create commotion and even create some negative image to it. So we have no right. And then he's so funny. He allowed us to share this story with people in our lives, and now we share with you. And he said, as bright as he was, he correlated with a personal story of his. He said, I remember when I used to live in Baltimore when I was doing my residency at Johns Hopkins University. He's a physician. And I had a friend who used to live in Delaware and was doing residency with me. And we would travel to Delaware some weekends just to eat a great hamburger that a city in Delaware had. And then when he moved from Washington State to Delaware a few years ago, the local media was so interested, because he is a celebrity, in asking him so he could judge the best hamburger in the city. So there he was. And then the verdict, he brought it in. He thought that X restaurant was the best. He said, 2 years after the newspapers released that was the best restaurant, it was closed. It was shut down. Why? Because they couldn't keep up with the pace. So many people came. They couldn't handle it. They didn't have human resource, material resource, infrastructure. You see why? We need to open new centers, but responsibly. Because if we don't do it, we can, negatively impact on the image of Spiritism. So being careful doesn't mean not doing anything. Because as Divaldo Franco says, in the story of the blue dress, a little girl who was given a blue dress by a blue velvet dress by a teacher. When she got home, her parents felt so inspired, they started changing her room because they observed that she was so pretty in the blue dress that they observed that they needed to give a better room for the girl. And then the better room pushed them to renovate the other rooms of the house, indoors and then outdoors. And then the neighbors started looking at it and saying, wow, look at what they're doing to their garden. And then they started doing it themselves. And then the neighbors got together and said, let's call the city to new paving for the street, our street. And then the neighbors of the other street were, feeling like getting to that a better sense of living at a greater style. And then soon after, the whole city was transformed. So this is how Spiritism is going to spread out, by each one of us feeling better, doing better, and then spreading it out. Yes, it is here to inspire us all. Spiritism is in North America and has come to stay because it brings a message that is undoubtedly deeply consoling, deeply inspiring, and most of all, truly empowering. And talk about empowerment, we are truly empowered by the honor of having our guests. Our guests here, may God bless them. May they feel the hug of our deepest gratitude for their time, for their sharing of personal history, of insights, and for the work they are doing in North America. We bless them with the gratitude of our hearts. Ask God to keep blessing them. And here, before we wrap up the show, we'd like to invite you for our final moment, a prayer. Why not? Prayer is good because as we pray, we have said here at the Spirit Side of Virginia, when we pray, we're logging in the account of the higher spirits. And who doesn't want to be logged in their account? We do. So let us pray. And this prayer is especially for the enemies of Spiritism, because they do exist. It's actually in chapter 28 of the Gospel According to Spiritism, items 50 to 52. A prayer to them, because they're children of God too. They don't know what they're doing. But sooner or later, like Saul, who became Paul, they will be transformed. Let us pray for them now. Oh Lord, through Jesus you said to us, blessed are they who suffer persecution for righteousness. Forgive your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And he himself showed us the way by praying for his murderers. Following his example, dear God, we implore your mercy on those who do not know your divine precepts, the only ones that can ensure peace in this world and in the other. Like Christ, we say to you, forgive them. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Give us strength to patiently and resignedly bear their mockery, insults, slander, and persecutions as trials for our faith and humility. Keep us from any thought of reprisal, for the hour of your love and justice will sound for all, and we await it by surrendering to your holy will. Dear listener, in the blessings of this beautiful prayer, we invite you next weekend, October 29th, as a segue of this program on North American Spiritism, we're inviting Marisa Cisneros Filho, who is the President of the United States Spiritist Council, to join us in a conversation about the obsession in the Spiritist movement. We needed to be more fully aware of the strategies of the obsessing spirits to block our way from unity, and not only that, from a great work in our centers, because we challenge it's natural. Our planet is not perfect yet, so the presence of ignorance is still here. What can we do? We can prevent and also remedy. So join us next week and rejoice, because there is a lot of therapy for our souls at Kardec Radio. May God bless us all.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.